The scent of pine and blood filled the hunting grounds, but beneath it lurked something more primal, the unmistakable musk of alphas gathering for the seasonal trial. My skin prickled with awareness as I pressed myself against the ancient oak, trying to disappear among the other omegas brought as prey. Unlike them, with their ceremonial hunting garb and practiced submission, I hadn't been trained for this moment. My silver-white hair hung loose and wild, lacking the braided marks that identified those raised in pack tradition. "Stand properly, girl," hissed the huntmaster, his fingers digging into my shoulder. "Alpha Supreme Kieran himself presides over tonight's hunt. Show some dignity." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. Dignity was a luxury afforded to those who weren't bartered away like livestock to appease powerful predators. Quick question, drop a comment, and let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing my global audience. 5 days ago, I had been gathering moonflowers in the forest that bordered our dying pack when the council elders came to my grandmother's cabin with their proposal, my participation in the hunt, in exchange for our settlement's survival. My grandmother's obsidian pendant hung heavy against my chest, hidden beneath the thin leather outfit they'd forced me into. "Remember, Lyra," she had whispered before the sickness took her, "your true nature is the one thing they cannot steal unless you reveal it." The pendant was carved with a creature neither fully wolf nor fully human, a symbol from the forbidden times before hybrids were hunted to extinction and omegas became nothing more than prey in the alpha's twisted games. The massive iron gates at the edge of the grounds swung open with a groan that silenced even the wind. The crowd fell into immediate, suffocating silence. A towering figure entered, flanked by warriors whose scars spoke of hunts survived and prey conquered. But it was him, Alpha Supreme Kieran, who commanded every gaze. He moved like death itself, each step deliberate and lethal. Dark furs draped across his shoulders despite the blazing torches that lit the grounds. His face remained carved from stone as he surveyed the gathering. But when his eyes swept over the line of omegas, something predatory flashed across his features, something that made my pulse race with dread. Those amber eyes found mine, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. "That one," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The pale one with untamed hair and defiant eyes. Every head turned toward me, and the huntmaster's grip became painful. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was meant to be overlooked, a token offering from a settlement too poor to provide worthy prey. I was supposed to survive the hunt by hiding, then return home after fulfilling my obligation. But Alpha Supreme Kieran had singled me out before the hunt even began. They dragged me to the center of the grounds like a criminal to execution. 2 guards flanking me as we crossed the blood-stained earth toward the starting line. Kieran had walked away immediately after selecting me, not bothering to witness the shocked whispers that followed his choice. I had been chosen over daughters of beta families, over omegas trained since childhood in evasion and survival. "Don't bother running far," one guard muttered, though his tone held pity. "The Supreme Alpha doesn't lose his prey." The other guard snorted, as if she'd make it past the first marker. "Look at her. Scrawny thing probably can't even shift properly." Kieran. Even his name felt like a curse against my skin. The starting horn loomed before us, a twisted metal sculpture that had witnessed countless hunts. My grandmother's stories came flooding back, tales of alphas who lived for the thrill of the chase, who treated omegas as sport rather than equals. tales I had dismissed as bitter warnings from a woman who'd lost too much to the pack hierarchy. "You have until the horn sounds 3 times, the huntmaster announced, his voice carrying across the grounds. "Then the alphas are released. Reach the sanctuary stone before you're caught, and you earn your freedom. Get caught." He smiled cruelly. "Well, we all know what happens to caught prey." My fingers found my grandmother's pendant, clutching it through the leather. Could I actually outrun an Alpha Supreme? And what would happen to my settlement when his rage descended upon them for my inevitable failure? The first horn blast shattered the night. My legs moved instinctively, carrying me toward the tree line as the other Omegas scattered in different directions. Behind me, I heard Kieran's voice, dark with amusement. "Run fast, little Omega. Make this interesting." Laughter followed his words, the cruel entertainment of alphas who'd never known real challenge. I plunged into the forest, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. The second horn sounded, echoing through the trees like a death knell. I had minutes, maybe less, before the Supreme Alpha and his hunters were released. 2 more horn blasts, I thought frantically. 2 more, and then... A root caught my foot, sending me sprawling into the undergrowth. Pain exploded in my ankle as I hit the ground hard. I bit back a scream, forcing myself upright. But when I tried to put weight on my left leg, agony shot through me. No, not now, not like this. The third horn blast rang out. The hunt had begun. Through the trees behind me, I heard them. The thundering of paws against the earth, the excited howls of alphas in pursuit. And above it all, one presence that made every instinct I possessed scream danger. Kieran, closing in on my location with terrifying speed. I limped forward, my injured ankle barely supporting my weight. This was it. I was going to be caught, humiliated, claimed by an alpha who'd chosen me as sport. My settlement would fall anyway when I failed to reach the sanctuary stone. Unless... My hand pressed against my grandmother's pendant, feeling the hybrid symbol carved into its surface. She had made me promise never to reveal what I truly was. The bloodline everyone believed extinct. The power that made me something far more dangerous than any Omega. But death or revelation, which was the greater risk? Kieran's scent hit me then, overwhelming and inescapable. Pine and smoke and predator. He was close. Too close. "Found you," his voice came from directly behind me, rich with satisfaction. I spun around, my back hitting a tree trunk. He stood there in his alpha form. Massive, powerful, every inch the apex predator. His amber eyes gleamed with triumph as he took in my injured state, my obvious inability to flee further. "That was disappointing," he said, shifting back to human form with fluid grace. "I expected more from the Omega bold enough to meet my gaze." He stepped closer, backing me against the tree. "Look at you. Can't even shift to heal that pathetic ankle. What kind of wolf are you?" His pack members emerged from the shadows, forming a circle around us. I could smell their amusement, their disdain for the weak Omega who'd been caught so easily. "Maybe she's not even a real wolf," one of them called out. "Maybe that settlement sent us a defective." Laughter rippled through the group. Kieran's hand shot out, gripping my chin and forcing me to meet his eyes. "Is that true, little Omega? Are you defective? Broken?" His thumb pressed against my lower lip. "Or are you just pathetically weak?" Rage burned through my fear. This male, this arrogant alpha who treated living beings as prey, who found entertainment in others' terror, he represented everything I'd been taught to hate about pack hierarchy. "Answer me," he commanded, his alpha voice resonating with power meant to compel obedience. But alpha commands didn't work the same on hybrids. "You want to know what I am?" I whispered, my hand closing around my grandmother's pendant. Kieran's eyes narrowed. "What are you?" I ripped the pendant free, breaking the enchantment that had suppressed my true nature since childhood. Power exploded through my body like liquid fire. Bones reformed, muscles expanded, and my consciousness split between human reason and something ancient, something predatory, something that had been caged for far too long. The transformation wasn't like a normal shift. This was evolution and chaos combined. My wolf form erupting with characteristics no pure werewolf possessed. Scales rippled along my spine, iridescent in the moonlight. My canines extended past anything natural, curved and venomous like a serpent's. My eyes, I knew without seeing, had turned from blue to molten silver, the mark of hybrid blood. I stood twice the size of Kieran's alpha form, my body a fusion of wolf, serpent, and something older that had no name. The forest fell silent. Kieran stared up at me, his expression shifting from arrogance to shock to something that might have been fear. Around us, his pack members backed away, their instincts screaming warnings their minds couldn't process. "Impossible," Kieran breathed. "Hybrids are extinct. They were all—" My growl cut him off, a sound that resonated with frequencies that hurt to hear. In this form I could speak, but my voice came layered with harmonics that bypassed conscious thought and struck directly at primal terror. "You wanted to see what I am," I said, each word reverberating through the clearing. "You laughed at my weakness, mocked my injury." I took a step forward, and Kieran, Alpha Supreme, leader of the most powerful pack in the region, took a step back. "Now kneel!" The command wasn't a request. It was a compulsion woven into the very fabric of my hybrid voice, resonating with frequencies that predated the modern pack hierarchies. Frequencies that spoke to the most primitive parts of the wolf brain, the parts that remembered when hybrids ruled, when creatures like me sat at the apex of the supernatural food chain. Kieran's legs trembled. I watched his muscles lock in conflict, his alpha pride warring against instincts millions of years old. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fought the inevitable. One by one, his pack members dropped to their knees, their heads bowed in automatic submission. They couldn't help themselves. The hybrid aura radiating from my transformed body left them no choice. But Kieran, stubborn, arrogant Kieran, remained standing. His jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grinding. His hands fisted at his sides, trembling with the effort of resistance. "Impressive," I acknowledged, stalking closer. Each step I took made the earth tremble slightly beneath my weight. "Your willpower is stronger than your pack's, but it won't be enough." "I am Alpha Supreme," he ground out, his voice strained. "I kneel to no one." "You will kneel to me." I let more of my power unfurl, the hybrid dominance that had been compressed and hidden for 23 years. It rolled off me in waves, visible distortions in the air, like heat rising from sun-baked stone. The scales along my spine lifted slightly, catching moonlight and refracting it in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Kieran's right knee buckled. He caught himself, but I saw the moment he realized the truth. He was going to fall. It was only a question of whether he did so with dignity or was forced into the dirt like prey beneath a predator's paw. "What are you?" he gasped, his left knee beginning to bend despite his desperate resistance. I am what your kind tried to eradicate, I replied, my massive hybrid form circling him slowly. I am the bloodline your ancestors feared, the power they couldn't control, so they chose to destroy. My tail, scaled and serpentine, nothing like a normal wolf's, wrapped around his ankle. Not squeezing, just present, a reminder of my otherworldliness. I am Lyra Nightshade, last of the hybrid bloodline, and you, Alpha Supreme. I leaned down, my muzzle inches from his face. You will kneel. His resistance shattered. Kieran dropped to both knees so hard the impact echoed through the clearing. His head bowed, neck exposed in the ultimate gesture of submission. Around us, his pack remained frozen, their eyes wide with terror and awe. The mighty Alpha Supreme, the male who had never lost a hunt, who commanded the largest pack territory in the northern regions, knelt in the dirt before me. Better, I purred, the sound vibrating through the ground. Now you understand the hierarchy. Now you know your place. I should have felt triumph, vindication. This male had humiliated me, mocked my weakness, treated me as prey to be hunted for sport. Seeing him kneeling should have filled me with satisfaction. Instead, I felt empty. What was the point of forcing submission through power? Wasn't that exactly what I hated about the pack system? The strong dominating the weak, using force to establish hierarchy? I was becoming what I despised. The realization hit me like cold water. My hybrid form wavered slightly as doubt crept in. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. Power without wisdom is just another form of tyranny, child. Never forget that. Slowly, deliberately, I began to shift back. The scales retracted, the venomous fangs shortened, and my body compressed back into my omega form. The transformation left me gasping, my injured ankle immediately screaming in protest as it took my full weight again. I staggered, and, impossibly, Kieran moved. Still kneeling, he reached out to steady me, his hand catching my elbow before I could fall. The gesture was so unexpected that I froze, staring down at him. His amber eyes met mine, and I saw no hatred there, no anger at being forced to submit. Instead, I saw curiosity, respect, and something else I couldn't identify. A hybrid, he said softly, his voice filled with wonder rather than fear. I thought I'd never see one in my lifetime. The texts said your kind was wiped out during the Purge Wars 300 years ago. Almost wiped out, I corrected, my voice hoarse from the transformation. I pulled my arm from his grip, trying to maintain distance despite my body's weakness. My bloodline survived by hiding, by suppressing what we were, by living as omegas in settlements too small to attract attention. Kieran rose slowly to his feet, but he didn't move closer. Around us, his pack remained kneeling, waiting for permission to rise. He ignored them, his full attention fixed on me. Your ankle, he observed. The shift didn't heal it? Hybrid transformations are different, more taxing. I grimaced as pain lanced through my leg. And I'm out of practice. I haven't shifted in years. Why reveal yourself now? His head tilted, studying me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. You could have hidden, waited for me to pass. I would have moved on to other prey. I laughed bitterly. With a twisted ankle, I couldn't run, couldn't hide. You would have caught me regardless. I met his gaze steadily. At least this way, I controlled how the encounter ended. Did you? Something sharp entered his expression. Because from where I'm standing, you just revealed the greatest secret your bloodline possesses to an alpha known for his strategic thinking. The threat was implicit. He knew what I was now. One word from him, and every pack in the region would be hunting me. The purge wars might have ended centuries ago, but fear of hybrids remained embedded in pack culture. "Are you going to expose me?" I asked quietly. "Call for my execution?" Kieran was silent for a long moment, his gaze never leaving mine. Finally, he turned to his pack. "What you witnessed here tonight remains in this clearing," he commanded, his alpha voice resonating with compulsion. "No one speaks of this hunt, of this prey, or of what was revealed, on penalty of exile and death. Understood?" A chorus of, "Yes, Alpha Supreme," echoed through the trees. He turned back to me. "There, your secret is safe." I stared at him, confused. "Why?" "Because—" He stepped closer, and I resisted the urge to retreat. "Because for the first time in my life, I've encountered someone who could challenge me. Someone who made me kneel not through politics or manipulation, but through pure, undeniable power." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? How refreshing?" "Refreshing?" I repeated incredulously. "I humiliated you in front of your pack. You reminded me that there are still forces in this world greater than my authority," he corrected. "You reminded me that alpha supremacy is an artificial construct, not a universal law." He gestured to the forest around us. "This hunt, this entire tradition, it's built on the assumption that alphas are the apex predators, that omegas are prey. You just shattered that assumption." I didn't know what to say. This wasn't the response I'd expected. Anger, yes. Threats, absolutely. But this philosophical reflection? "Your ankle needs treatment," Kieran continued, his tone shifting to something more practical. "And we need to talk, really talk about what your existence means." "I'm not going back to your pack grounds," I said immediately. "I'm not putting myself in your territory, surrounded by your wolves." "Fair enough." He looked around the clearing, then pointed to a rock formation visible through the trees. "There's a cave system near here, neutral ground. We can talk there while someone tends to your injury." "All right, we're halfway through this intense story. If you're enjoying Lyra's journey and want to see what happens next, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me, should she trust Kieran or is this a trap? Your thoughts fuel these stories. "You expect me to trust you?" I asked, incredulous. "The male who literally hunted me for sport an hour ago?" "No," Kieran replied honestly. "I expect you to be pragmatic. You're injured, exhausted from a transformation you're not accustomed to, and you're in the middle of my territory. You need medical attention and a safe place to recover. I'm offering both." He wasn't wrong. My ankle throbbed with every heartbeat, and the hybrid transformation had drained me more than I wanted to admit. I could barely stand, let alone make the journey back to my settlement. "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" I asked suspiciously. His smile turned enigmatic. "Answers, understanding, a chance to learn about a species I thought was mythology." He paused. "And perhaps an alliance." "Alliance?" The word tasted foreign. "Between an Alpha Supreme and a hybrid Omega? Why not?" He extended his hand toward me. "The old hierarchies are crumbling anyway. The pack system is rotting from within. Endless territory disputes, challenges for dominance, Omegas treated as commodities. What if we could build something different, something better?" I stared at his outstretched hand, my grandmother's warnings warring with desperate hope. Could an alpha really want change? Or was this just another form of manipulation, a trap disguised as opportunity? My ankle decided for me. It buckled, and I pitched forward with a gasp of pain. Kieran caught me before I hit the ground, his arms steady and unexpectedly gentle. "Easy," he murmured. "I've got you." "I don't need—" I started to protest. "Yes, you do." His tone brooked no argument. "Pride is admirable, Lyra Nightshade, but stubbornness in the face of injury is just stupidity." Before I could respond, he scooped me into his arms, cradling me against his chest as though I weighed nothing. The casual display of strength should have frightened me. Instead, I found myself hyper-aware of his warmth, his scent, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my ear. "Put me down," I said weakly. "No." He started walking toward the cave system, his pack falling into formation around us without needing orders. "You can either accept help with dignity, or you can struggle and make your injury worse. Your choice." I wanted to argue, wanted to demand he release me, to prove I didn't need his assistance. But exhaustion was catching up with me, dragging at my consciousness like weights. "This doesn't mean I trust you," I muttered against his shoulder. I felt his chest rumble with quiet laughter. "Noted. Now rest. We have a long conversation ahead of us, and you'll need your strength." "I'm not weak," I insisted, even as my eyes began to drift closed. "I know," Kieran replied softly. "You're the strongest being I've ever encountered, but even the strongest need to rest sometimes." The last thing I heard before unconsciousness claimed me was his voice, murmuring something that sounded like a promise. "I'll keep you safe." When I woke, I was lying on soft furs in a cave lit by a small fire. My ankle had been carefully wrapped, and someone had placed a blanket over me. The pain had dulled to a manageable ache, suggesting I'd been given some kind of pain medicine while I slept. Kieran sat across the fire from me, his attention focused on a leather-bound book. He'd changed from his hunting gear into simple dark clothing, and without the ceremonial trappings of his position, he looked younger, more human. "You're awake," he observed, without looking up from his reading. "How long was I unconscious?" I pushed myself upright, wincing as my ankle protested the movement. 3 hours, give or take." He closed the book and set it aside. "Long enough for my healer to set your ankle and ensure you hadn't sustained any internal injuries from the transformation." I checked myself over quickly. My clothes were still intact, and aside from the wrapped ankle, I appeared unharmed. "Where's your pack?" "Outside, maintaining a perimeter." He gestured to the cave entrance. "I thought you'd prefer privacy for our conversation." "Considerate of you," I said dryly. "I can be, when the situation warrants it." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Now, Lyra Nightshade, last of the hybrid bloodline, tell me your story. How did your family survive when all the others fell?" I studied him carefully, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives. But his expression held only genuine curiosity and something that might have been respect. "Why should I tell you anything?" I countered. "You're an Alpha Supreme. Your kind led the Purge Wars. Your ancestors are the reason mine had to hide." "True," he acknowledged, without defensiveness. "My bloodline has a lot to answer for. But I am not my ancestors, Lyra, and you are not obligated to pay for their sins any more than I should be punished for mine." The logic was sound, even if I didn't want to admit it. "My great-great-grandmother," I began slowly, "survived the purge by suppressing her hybrid nature entirely. She lived as a rogue Omega, never shifting, never revealing what she truly was. She passed that suppression technique to her daughter, who passed it to my grandmother, who passed it to me." "The pendant," Kieran said, understanding dawning. "It's not just symbolic. It's a suppression totem." I nodded, my hand instinctively going to my neck where the pendant had hung. Without it, keeping my hybrid nature contained required constant effort and concentration. Breaking it released everything I'd been holding back since childhood. And your parents? Pain lanced through my chest. Dead. My father was human. My mother hid what she was from him. When I was 12, hunters came to our settlement. Not pack hunters, human ones, looking for supernatural beings to sell on the black market. Kieran's expression darkened. Go on. My mother shifted to protect me, revealed herself as hybrid to fight them off. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. She killed 3 of them before they brought her down with silver bullets. My father died trying to defend her. I survived because my grandmother got me out before they could identify me as hybrid too. I'm sorry. The words were simple, but they carried genuine weight. Are you? I challenged. Your kind created the world where hybrids had to hide, where my mother died because she dared to protect her child. You're right to be angry, Kieran said quietly. The pack system is built on fear and oppression. Alphas maintain power by convincing everyone else they're superior, by making Omegas believe they're weak, by treating anyone different as a threat to be eliminated. His admission shocked me. You're Alpha Supreme. You benefit from that system more than anyone. Do I? His laugh was bitter. I'm 28 years old, Lyra. I've been Alpha Supreme since I was 19. Do you know how I earned that title? I shook my head. I challenged and killed my predecessor in ritual combat. Not because I wanted power, but because he was selling Omega children to fighting rings for profit. Kieran's hands clenched into fists. The pack laws said I had to challenge him to stop it. Had to risk death in single combat because that's the only way change happens in our precious hierarchy. He stood abruptly, pacing the small cave. I've spent 9 years trying to reform the system from within, ending the worst practices, protecting the vulnerable, pushing for Omega rights. And you know what I've learned? What? That you can't fix a rotten foundation by rearranging the furniture. The whole structure needs to be torn down and rebuilt. He turned to face me, his amber eyes intense. That's why your existence matters, Lyra. You're proof that the hierarchy is a lie, that Omegas aren't weak, that there are forces in this world that make alpha supremacy look like the petty power play it actually is. I wanted to distrust him, wanted to believe this was manipulation or an elaborate scheme. But the passion in his voice, the frustration and hope mixed together, it felt genuine. What exactly are you proposing? I asked carefully. Kieran returned to his seat across the fire. A partnership. You help me dismantle the corrupt pack system. I help protect your identity and your settlement. Together, we show the supernatural world that cooperation between different beings is possible. That power doesn't have to mean domination. That's ambitious. It's necessary. His gaze held mine. The pack system is failing, Lyra. Territory wars are escalating. Omega trafficking is on the rise. Rogue packs are attacking settlements like yours because there's no unified law. Only might makes right. He leaned forward. We can offer an alternative, a coalition built on mutual respect rather than forced submission. The vision he painted was seductive, a world where I didn't have to hide, where my power could protect rather than endanger, where Omegas and Alphas and hybrids could coexist without constant fear. But visions and reality were different things. Your pack would never accept me, I pointed out. They knelt because my hybrid dominance forced them to. The moment that pressure is gone, they'll see me as a threat. Some will, Kieran agreed. Others will see opportunity. Change is always messy and met with resistance, but His smile turned fierce. I didn't become Alpha Supreme by taking the easy path. And something tells me you're not afraid of a challenge either. He wasn't wrong about that. I need guarantees, I said, surprising myself by actually considering this insane proposition. My settlement's safety, non-negotiable. No hunts, no raids, no tributes demanded. Done. I keep my independence. I'm not joining your pack, not submitting to your authority. Agreed. We work as equals. And if this partnership fails, if your pack rejects this alliance, Kieran's expression turned serious. Then I help you disappear. New identity, new location, whatever you need to stay safe. I studied him for a long moment, weighing risks against possibilities. Everything in my survival instincts screamed that trusting an Alpha Supreme was suicide. But my grandmother's voice whispered different advice. Sometimes the greatest risk is refusing to take any risk at all, child. One condition, I said finally. Before I agree to anything, I want to see your pack grounds. Meet your inner circle. I need to know what I'd be walking into. Kieran's smile was slow and genuine. That's remarkably sensible for someone who just revealed herself as a supposedly extinct hybrid to a pack of strangers. I have my moments. He stood, extending his hand once more. Then we have an accord, a trial partnership, pending your approval of my pack? I looked at his outstretched hand, at the male who had gone from hunting me to offering alliance in the span of one night. This was either the beginning of something revolutionary or the biggest mistake of my life. Only one way to find out which. I reached out and clasped his hand. Trial partnership, I agreed. But Kieran, if you betray me, hybrid dominance will be the least of your problems. His grip was firm and warm. I wouldn't expect anything less. I stood in the center of the stone circle, chest heaving, watching as Kyle dragged himself to his feet. His wolf form was broken, ribs showing through matted fur, one eye swollen shut from where my claws had connected. He limped to the edge of the clearing, and not a single member of the pack moved to help him. That was the way of wolves. Loyalty lasted only as long as strength did. The borrowed power from the standing stones was already fading, seeping back into the earth like water into parched soil. My hybrid form flickered, unstable without that external source, and I felt the exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. Every muscle screamed, bones aching from the transformation and the fight. I wavered on my feet, and immediately Theron was there, his hand on my elbow, steadying me with a touch that sent unexpected heat through my battered body. "Easy," he murmured, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Don't show weakness. Not yet. They're watching to see if you'll falter." He was right. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, assessing, judging, waiting to see if their new alpha would collapse the moment the challenge ended. I forced myself to stand straighter, to meet their gazes with as much confidence as I could muster, despite feeling like I might shatter into pieces at any moment. "The pack returns to the compound," I announced, and was relieved when my voice came out steady, authoritative. "We have much to discuss about the future of Nightfall." They dispersed slowly, shifting back to human form and gathering their scattered clothes, casting glances over their shoulders at me, some respectful, others calculating, a few openly hostile. Marcus, the beta I'd forced to submit, kept his distance, his human form showing the bruises my clawed hand had left around his throat. Good. Let them remember what happened when they underestimated me. Kyle was the last to shift back, his naked human body showing the same injuries his wolf had sustained. He met my eyes across the clearing, and the hatred burning there was palpable enough to taste, bitter and toxic on my tongue. "This isn't over," he said quietly, but every wolf heard him. "You think beating me in one fight makes you alpha? You don't know the first thing about leading a pack, about making the hard choices, about protecting territory from the things that hunt us in the dark." "Then I'll learn," I replied, refusing to back down from his stare. "Unlike you, I don't need to rule through fear and cruelty." His laugh was sharp and humorless. "You really are naive. This world doesn't reward kindness, little hybrid. It devours it." He turned away, accepting a cloak from one of the few wolves who still showed him deference. "But by all means, try your gentle approach. When it fails, and it will, I'll be waiting to pick up the pieces." He limped away into the forest, and I watched him go with a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. Theron was right about one thing. I had won the challenge, claimed the title, but I had no idea how to actually be an alpha, how to lead wolves who had spent years learning to see me as nothing. "Come," Theron said, his hand still on my elbow, steady and warm. "You need medical attention and rest. The pack can wait until tomorrow for your grand vision of leadership." I wanted to argue, to prove I was strong enough to address them immediately, but my hybrid form chose that moment to flicker again, threatening to collapse entirely. Theron caught me as my legs buckled, lifting me with an ease that should have been embarrassing, but somehow wasn't. His scent wrapped around me, cedar and leather and something darker, more primal, and I found myself leaning into his chest despite every instinct screaming that I should maintain distance from Kyle's former second. "I can walk," I protested weakly. "Of course you can," he agreed, making no move to put me down. "But you don't have to. Not with me." The walk back to the compound was a blur of shadows and moonlight filtering through ancient trees. Other pack members moved around us in the darkness, some keeping pace, others ranging ahead to scout, or falling behind to guard our rear. It was coordinated, practiced, the kind of unity that came from years of running together. And I was supposed to lead this? Command their loyalty when I barely understood pack dynamics? The compound emerged from the forest like something out of a fever dream, a sprawling collection of stone buildings built into the mountainside, connected by covered walkways and surrounded by walls that had stood for centuries. Torches blazed along the ramparts, and I could see sentries posted at regular intervals, their eyes reflecting firelight as they watched our approach. Theron carried me through the main gates, ignoring the stares and whispered conversations that followed in our wake. He took me not to the great hall where I'd been collared and humiliated earlier, but to a different building, smaller, more private, with windows that overlooked the forest valley below. "The Alpha's quarters," he explained, shouldering open a heavy wooden door. "Yours now, by right of challenge." The room beyond was austere but functional, a massive bed covered in furs, a fireplace already crackling with fresh flames, a desk littered with maps and correspondence. Kyle's space until a few hours ago. I could still smell him here, that cold winter scent that made my hybrid nature bristle with instinctive dislike. Theron set me down on the bed with surprising gentleness, and I finally let my hybrid form collapse, the transformation reversing in a cascade of pain that tore a gasp from my throat. My human body felt fragile after the power of my hybrid shape, all too aware of its limitations, its vulnerability. "Here," Theron said, offering me a robe from a nearby chest. "Unless you prefer to conduct pack business naked, though I imagine that would certainly establish dominance in its own way." Heat flooded. Heat. My cheeks, as I realized I was completely bare, my ceremonial dress from the hunt destroyed during the transformation. I snatched the robe from him and wrapped it around myself with as much dignity as I could manage, which wasn't much given that my hands were shaking. If you're enjoying this dark romance story, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, this story is about to get even more intense. Thank you, I managed, for helping me back. You didn't have to. His dark eyes studied me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. Didn't I? You're my alpha now. My loyalty is yours by pack law. He moved to the desk, pouring amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. The question is whether you'll be wise enough to use it. Is that a threat? An observation. He handed me 1 glass, and our fingers brushed. The contact sent electricity up my arm, making me acutely aware of how close he was standing, how his scent seemed to fill the room despite the lingering traces of kale. You've won a battle, Lyra, but the war for this pack's loyalty is just beginning. Kyle still has supporters, wolves who benefited from his reign of terror. They'll test you, push boundaries, wait for you to show weakness. I took a sip of the liquid, whiskey, smooth and burning, and let it fortify my courage. And you? Which side are you on? The side of strength, he answered without hesitation. Always. I served Kale because he was the strongest, most ruthless wolf in the pack. Now I serve you because you defeated him. His lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Though I'll admit, I'm curious to see how long you can hold what you've claimed. Want more dark romance stories like this? Hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. Before I could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Theron crossed the room in 3 long strides, opening it to reveal a young woman with auburn hair and eyes that glowed faintly gold in the firelight. She bowed her head respectfully, first to Theron, then to me. "Forgive the interruption, Alpha," she said, her voice melodious despite the tension evident in her posture. "But we have a situation at the eastern border. Scouts report unknown wolves approaching pack territory, at least 20, possibly more." Ice flooded my veins. 20 wolves? That was a war party, not a patrol. "Did they identify which pack?" Theron demanded, his entire demeanor shifting from contemplative to battle-ready in a heartbeat. The woman shook her head. "No markings we recognize, but—" She hesitated, glancing at me uncertainly before continuing. "They're asking for the hybrid, by name." The room went deathly quiet. Theron's eyes snapped to mine, and I saw calculation there, suspicion mixed with something darker. "Who knows about you?" he asked quietly. "About what you are?" "No one," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't entirely true. Kyle had known, or at least suspected. His father had experimented on my mother, had tried to create hybrids. Who else might have been part of those experiments? Who else might be hunting for proof that they had succeeded? "This isn't coincidence," Theron said, already moving toward a weapons rack on the wall. He pulled down a wicked-looking blade, checking its edge with practiced efficiency. "Someone knew you'd manifest tonight, knew you'd be weakened after the challenge." He looked at the auburn-haired woman. "How long before they reach the compound?" "An hour, maybe less if they're pushing hard." "Gather the warriors in the Great Hall, full battle gear." His orders came rapid fire, the voice of someone accustomed to command. "Double the sentries on the walls. No one enters or leaves without my personal authorization." He glanced at me. "Our Alpha's orders, of course." The woman's eyes flickered between us, clearly uncertain about the sudden shift in power dynamics. I forced myself to stand, to project confidence I didn't feel. "Do as he says," I confirmed, "and send word to Kale. Whatever our differences, we'll need every fighter if there's a real threat coming." She bowed and disappeared, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. I turned to find Theron watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "Inviting Kale back into the fold already?" he asked. "Bold or suicidal?" "He said I didn't know how to protect the pack from things that hunt in the dark," I replied, pulling the robe tighter around myself. "Well, here's my chance to prove him wrong, and I need experienced warriors who know this territory, even if they hate me." Something that might have been approval flickered across Theron's features. "Practical. Good." He tossed me a bundle of leather clothing from another chest. "Get dressed. Battle leathers, not ceremonial robes. If we're going to war, you need to look the part." I caught the bundle, grateful to have something to do with my shaking hands. "You think it will come to that? War? 20 unknown wolves demanding our alpha by name on the same night she manifests?" Theron's voice was grim. "This was planned, Lyra. Someone has been waiting for this moment, watching for it. The question is why?" As I dressed in the unfamiliar battle gear, leather reinforced with metal studs designed for mobility and protection, my mind raced through possibilities. Kyle's father's research, the experiments on my mother, the other hybrids that must have been created, or at least attempted. Were there others like me out there? Others who had survived the process? Or was this something darker? Something my mother had died trying to protect me from? "Tell me about the night Kyle's father died," I said, lacing up the leather vambraces. "The truth this time." Theron was silent for a long moment, his back to me as he selected more weapons from the rack. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of carefully guarded secrets. "Magnus, Kale's father, was obsessed with power, with transcending the limitations of pure wolf bloodlines. He believed that if he could successfully merge alpha blood with moonspeaker abilities, he could create the ultimate warrior, something that could dominate not just rival packs, but the other supernatural species that share our world. My mother was part of his experiments." "Your mother was his greatest success," Theron corrected, turning to face me. "And his greatest failure. She manifested the hybrid form, proved it was possible, but she also proved something he hadn't anticipated." "What?" "That hybrids can't be controlled, can't be bound or broken the way normal wolves can." His eyes held mine. "Your mother escaped his compound, pregnant with you, and disappeared. Magnus spent years trying to find her, trying to replicate his success with other subjects. None of them survived the process. None except what?" I demanded when he trailed off. "There were rumors," he said slowly. "Shortly before Magnus died, he claimed to have achieved another successful hybrid transformation. But he kept that subject isolated, hidden even from his inner circle. And then, the night he died, whoever he'd been keeping vanished. Some said the subject killed him and fled. Others said Magnus released them deliberately, as part of some larger plan." A chill ran down my spine. "You think that's who's coming for me? Another hybrid?" "I think," Theron said carefully, "that 20 years is a long time to nurse a grudge, long enough to build an army, long enough to plan revenge on the bloodline that created you, and then tried to destroy you." The implications crashed over me like cold water. If another hybrid existed, one who had been Magnus's captive, his experimental subject, they would have every reason to hate anyone connected to him, including me, his greatest success, living free while they suffered. "We need to evacuate non-combatants," I said, my mind shifting into strategy mode despite my exhaustion. "Anyone who can't fight shouldn't be here when they arrive." "Already being handled," Theron assured me. "The elders and pups are being moved to the mountain caves. They'll be safe there." A thought struck me. What about Kale? Will he actually help defend the pack, or will he see this as an opportunity? Theron's smile was sharp and humorless. "Kale is many things: cruel, ambitious, ruthless, but he's not suicidal. If another pack attacks Nightfall while he's here, he'll fight. Self-preservation, if nothing else." I finished dressing and caught my reflection in a polished shield hanging on the wall. The woman staring back at me looked nothing like the frightened Omega who had been dragged to the Great Hall hours ago. Battle leathers fit like a second skin, my blonde hair wild and tangled, eyes still carrying traces of the hybrid glow. I looked dangerous, feral. I looked like an alpha. "Let's go meet our visitors," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice, "and find out exactly who knows what I am." I woke to the sound of screaming. My hybrid instincts kicked in before conscious thought, launching me from the bed and toward the window. Outside, flames painted the pre-dawn sky, orange and red. The scent of smoke mixed with something more sinister, burning flesh and the acrid chemical smell of accelerants. I yanked on clothes and burst from the cabin, bare feet hitting cold earth as I sprinted toward the chaos. Pack members ran in every direction, some carrying buckets of water, others herding children toward the central buildings. What happened? I grabbed a passing wolf, barely recognizing him as one of Kieran's enforcers. "The eastern border," he gasped, his face smudged with soot. "They hit the Omega Sanctuary, trapped them inside and set it ablaze." Horror flooded through me. "How many?" "At least 20 Omegas and their children." He pulled free from my grip. "The Alpha Supreme is already there." I ran. The Omega Sanctuary sat at the edge of pack grounds, a converted warehouse that housed Omegas who'd fled abusive situations or needed temporary shelter. Kieran had mentioned it during our walk, pride evident in his voice as he described one of his reform initiatives. Now it was an inferno. Kieran stood at the entrance, his body half-shifted, using his alpha strength to hold up a collapsing beam while pack members evacuated the trapped occupants. His skin blistered from the heat, but he didn't move, didn't falter. "Get them out!" he roared over the flames. "Everyone out now!" I assessed the situation with tactical precision. The main entrance was the only accessible exit. The attackers had barricaded the others from outside. Fire climbed the walls with unnatural speed, the accelerants ensuring maximum damage. And the beam Kieran held wouldn't last much longer before the entire structure collapsed. Sarah appeared beside me, her face grim. "We've got most of them out, but there's at least 5 still trapped in the back sleeping quarters. The fire's too intense. We can't reach them." "Where?" I demanded. She pointed to a window on the second floor, completely engulfed in flames. "There, but it's suicide to—" I was already moving. "Lyra, no!" Kieran's voice cut through the chaos, but I ignored him. I shifted mid-run, not to my full hybrid form, but to something in between. Enough scales to protect against the heat, enough speed to reach the window before the flames consumed everything. My serpent heritage gave me resistance to fire that normal wolves lacked. I crashed through the burning window in an explosion of glass and flame, rolling to absorb the impact. Inside, smoke choked the air, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. "Help!" A child's voice, small and terrified, came from the left. I followed the sound, my hybrid vision cutting through the smoke better than normal sight. 5 Omegas huddled in the corner, 3 adults and 2 children, trapped behind a wall of flame that cut them off from the stairs. "I'm here to get you out," I called, my hybrid voice resonating with authority that cut through their panic. "Stay together and follow me exactly." "We can't go through the fire," one of the adults sobbed. "We'll burn." "You won't." I extended my partially shifted form, scales spreading across more of my body. "My scales can shield you, but you have to trust me and move fast." I didn't wait for agreement. Time was running out. The ceiling groaned ominously above us, ready to collapse. I grabbed the 2 children, tucking them against my chest where my scales were thickest, then turned to the adults. "Hold on to me and keep your heads down." They grasped my shoulders, my arms, anywhere they could find purchase. I took a breath and charged through the wall of flame. The heat was excruciating even with my hybrid resistance. My scales absorbed most of it, but the parts of me still Omega felt like they were being flayed alive. The children screamed against my chest. The adults clung so tightly I felt bruises forming. But we made it through. I stumbled toward the window I'd entered through, my vision blurring from smoke inhalation. The fall would be dangerous, but less dangerous than staying in this death trap. "We're jumping," I announced. "Don't let go." I leaped through the window, just as the ceiling collapsed behind us. We hit the ground hard. I twisted my body to take the worst of the impact, feeling something in my ribs crack from the force. Strong hands pulled the Omegas away from me. Sarah's face appeared above mine, her expression unreadable. "You insane, reckless, stupid." She cut herself off, then grabbed my arm and hauled me to my feet. "Can you walk?" "Yes." I winced as my cracked ribs protested. "The fire?" "Under control now that everyone's out." She gestured to where Kieran had finally released the beam and stepped back, letting the entrance collapse. Pack members formed bucket chains, dousing the flames before they could spread to other structures. I shifted back to my Omega form, immediately regretting it as the full extent of my injuries made themselves known. Burns covered my arms and legs, my ribs screamed with each breath, and smoke damage had left my throat raw. "Medical tent," Sarah ordered, supporting my weight when my legs wavered. "Now." "I'm fine." "You just threw yourself through a burning building to save people you don't even know," she interrupted. "You're going to medical, and you're going to let them treat you before you collapse." The concern in her voice surprised me. This was the same enforcer who'd wanted to test me yesterday, who'd made clear she didn't trust me. "Why do you care?" I asked, as she half-carried me toward a hastily erected medical station. Sarah's jaw tightened. "Because anyone willing to risk themselves like that for Omegas, hybrid or not, deserves basic medical care." She paused. "And because maybe I was wrong about you." Before I could process that admission, Kieran appeared, his own burns evident. Across his chest and arms, his eyes swept over me, cataloging every injury with alpha intensity. "You could have died," he said quietly. "So could you," I countered. "You held that beam long enough for your skin to blister." "I'm Alpha Supreme. It's my duty to protect pack members." "And I'm your partner. Same duty applies." Something shifted in his expression, approval mixed with frustration. "We'll discuss your definition of partnership after you're treated." The pack healer, a wizened woman named Mora, descended on us both with ruthless efficiency. She slathered burns with silver-infused salve that stung like hell, but immediately started healing the damaged tissue. For my cracked ribs, she wrapped my torso tightly and forced me to drink a foul-tasting tea that she promised would accelerate bone healing. As Mora worked, pack members brought news. All 25 Omegas and children had survived, thanks to Kieran holding the entrance and my rescue of the trapped 5. The sanctuary was a total loss, but lives had been preserved. The attackers? I asked between sips of terrible tea. Kieran's expression darkened. Gone before we could pursue, but they left a message. Marcus appeared, holding a scorched piece of fabric. On it, burned into the material with precise lettering, were 3 words: Pure Blood Alliance. They wanted us to know who was responsible, Marcus said grimly. This wasn't just an attack, it was a declaration. I studied the message, feeling cold rage settle in my chest. They targeted Omegas specifically, the most vulnerable members of your pack. To send a message about what happens to alphas who coddle weakness, Kieran replied, his voice tight with controlled fury. The Pure Blood Alliance believes in traditional hierarchy above all else. Omegas exist to serve, to submit, to breed, protecting them, giving them sanctuary, treating them as equals. That's heresy to their worldview. And they'll keep attacking until you fall in line or fall completely, I concluded. Probably. He met my eyes. Still want to be my partner in this fight? I thought about the children I'd carried from the flames, about the terror in those Omega's eyes as they'd huddled in that corner waiting to die. I thought about my mother, who'd died protecting me from a world that saw us as less than. About my grandmother, who'd spent her entire life hiding what she was out of fear. More than ever, I answered. Devon entered the medical tent, his expression urgent. Alpha Supreme, we've identified how they breached our borders. They had inside help. Someone disabled the perimeter wards on the eastern edge. The implications were immediate and damning. Someone within Kieran's pack had assisted the Pure Blood Alliance, a traitor who'd helped murder Omegas to prove a point about hierarchy and power. Lock down the compound, Kieran ordered immediately. No one enters or leaves until we identify who compromised our defenses. Devon, I want interrogations. Started within the hour. Focus on anyone who had access to the wardstones. That's half the pack, Marcus protested. You can't seriously intend to treat your own people as suspects. Someone betrayed us, Kieran replied, his alpha voice resonating with authority. Someone helped the Pure Blood Alliance murder innocents under my protection. Until I know who, everyone is suspect. The tent fell silent. This was Kieran as Alpha Supreme, not the reform-minded idealist, but the ruthless leader who'd killed his predecessor in single combat. I can help, I offered, drawing surprised looks. Hybrid abilities include enhanced senses. I can detect lies, read emotional states that normal wolves might miss. Absolutely not, Marcus objected immediately. Using a hybrid to interrogate pack members? The optics alone? I don't care about optics, Kieran interrupted. I care about finding who's responsible before they strike again. He turned to me. Are you certain you can detect deception? With physical contact, yes. I stood, carefully, my ribs protesting but holding. It's part of how hybrids maintained social order before the purge. We could sense intention, identify threats before they manifested. Then you'll assist with interrogations, Kieran decided. Marcus, coordinate with Devon on who to question first. Sarah, I want security doubled around remaining Omega housing. And someone find Elena. Make sure the sanctuary survivors have shelter and support. As pack members scattered to follow orders, Kieran pulled me aside. Thank you, he said quietly, for saving those Omegas, for staying when you could have run. Where would I run to? I countered. My settlement is a week's journey away, and the Pure Blood Alliance just proved they'll attack anyone associated with you. Running would only make me an easier target. Pragmatic as always. His lips quirked into an almost smile. Though, I suspect pragmatism isn't the only reason you charged into that burning building. He wasn't wrong. Somewhere between forcing him to his knees in the forest and watching him hold a collapsing beam while his skin blistered, my feelings about Kieran had become complicated. He wasn't just an Alpha Supreme anymore. He was someone who genuinely fought for the vulnerable, who risked himself for ideals rather than power. That was dangerously close to admirable. All right, everyone, we're in the thick of it now. The Pure Blood Alliance has made their move, and Lyra's getting pulled deeper into pack politics. If you're loving this story, hit that like button, drop a comment with your theories about who the traitor might be, and subscribe so you don't miss the explosive finale. Your support keeps these stories coming. The interrogations start in an hour, Kieran continued. Think you can be ready despite your injuries? I'll manage. I touched my wrapped ribs gingerly. Though I'm curious, why do you trust me to do this? I could lie about what I sense, manipulate the results to serve my own agenda. Could you? He studied me with those intense amber eyes. Because everything I've observed suggests you're constitutionally incapable of that kind of deception. You're blunt to the point of rudeness. You say exactly what you think regardless of consequences, and you charged into a burning building to save strangers. That's not trust, I pointed out. That's just reading my personality. No, he said softly. Trust is what made me cut my palm and swear a blood oath with someone I'd known less than a week. Trust is believing you meant it when you promised not to use compulsion on my pack. Trust is... He hesitated, then continued. Trust is hoping this partnership becomes something more than political convenience. The admission hung between us, heavy with implication. Before I could formulate a response, Elena burst into the tent, her face pale with distress. Alpha Supreme, we have a problem. The sanctuary survivors are refusing shelter in the main compound. They're terrified there's more traitors, that accepting housing will make them targets again. Kieran's expression tightened with frustration. Where are they now? Huddled outside the ruins, won't move despite the cold. Elena wrung her hands. I've tried reasoning with them, but they're too traumatized to listen. I'll talk to them, I offered. You? Elena looked doubtful. No offense, but you're a stranger to them. Why would they trust you? Because I'm the one who carried their children out of the fire, I replied. And because I'm not part of the pack hierarchy they're afraid of. Kieran nodded slowly. Try. If anyone can reach them right now, it's you. I found the sanctuary survivors exactly where Elena had described, 25 Omegas and children sitting in the cold morning air, staring at the smoking ruins of what had been their safe haven. They looked like refugees from a war zone, covered in soot and burns, wrapped in donated blankets. The children spotted me first. The two I'd carried from the flames broke away from their mothers and ran toward me. You came back, the smaller one cried, attaching herself to my leg despite my injuries. Careful, I cautioned, wincing as the impact jarred my ribs. I'm a bit breakable right now. You saved us, the older child said, his eyes too serious for someone so young. Mama said you're a hybrid, that you're dangerous. I crouched down to his eye level, ignoring the screaming protest from my ribs. I am dangerous, but dangerous and harmful aren't the same thing. Danger can protect, if pointed in the right direction. One of the adult Omegas approached, a woman whose arm was wrapped in bandages from burns she'd sustained. "You're the one who pulled us through the fire? Your scales?" She gestured vaguely at my arms, where traces of healing burns marked where my hybrid form had shielded them. "My scales, my abilities, my heritage," I confirmed. "All the things your pack was probably taught to fear, and yet here we are." "Why did you save us?" another Omega asked, her voice suspicious. "What do you gain?" "Nothing," I replied honestly. "I saved you because you needed saving, and I could help. That's all. The Alpha Supreme sent you to convince us to accept housing," the first woman guessed, "to trust the pack that just allowed us to be burned alive." "Actually, I volunteered," I corrected. "Because I understand what it's like to be seen as lesser, to have your safety dependent on the whims of those more powerful. I've lived my entire life as a hidden hybrid in a world that would execute me if they knew what I was." I gestured to the ruins behind them. "But refusing shelter out of fear? That's letting the Pure Blood Alliance win. That's letting them destroy not just your building, but your spirit, your will to survive." "Easy for you to say," an Omega near the back called out. "You're powerful, dangerous like you said. You don't need anyone's protection." "Don't I?" I stood, pulling up my shirt enough to show the bandages around my ribs. "I got these injuries saving you. Without pack healers, without shelter, without the resources Kieran is offering, I'd be significantly worse off." I lowered my shirt. "Power doesn't make you immune to needing others. It just changes what kind of help you require." The children's mother spoke up. "They targeted us specifically, the attackers. They could have hit any building, but they chose the Omega Sanctuary. Because we represent everything the Pure Blood Alliance hates, Omegas being valued, protected, treated as worthy of resources." "Exactly," I agreed. "Which is why refusing to be protected, to accept shelter, to rebuild, is exactly what they want. They want you terrified, isolated, believing the pack can't or won't keep you safe." "Can they?" The question came from multiple Omegas simultaneously. I thought about Kieran holding that beam until his skin blistered. About Sarah organizing evacuation routes with ruthless efficiency. About pack members risking themselves in bucket chains to contain the fire. "They tried," I said carefully. "The attack succeeded because someone betrayed them, disabled the wards, gave the Alliance access. But once the alarm was raised, every pack member I saw was working to save you, to contain the damage, to protect what remained. And if the traitor strikes again," the suspicious Omega challenged, "then we find them before they can," I replied. "That's actually why I'm here. The Alpha Supreme is conducting interrogations to identify who compromised the defenses. I'm assisting because hybrid senses can detect deception that normal interrogation might miss." This admission caused a ripple of reaction through the group. Some looked hopeful, others more frightened. "You can force confessions," one Omega accused. "Use that compulsion hybrid power to make anyone admit anything." "I could," I acknowledged, "but I swore a blood oath not to use compulsion on pack members for personal gain or dominance. The magic ensures I keep that oath. Breaking it would cause consequences ranging from debilitating pain to death, depending on the violation's severity." I held up my scarred palm, showing them the silver mark from the oath. "This isn't just a promise, it's magically binding. I literally cannot abuse my abilities the way you're suggesting without suffering immediate consequences." The mothers exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, the one whose arm was bandaged spoke. "If we accept shelter, we want it in a building that we control, with our own locks, our own wards, our own security that doesn't depend on pack hierarchy." That seems reasonable, I agreed. I'll relay that to the Alpha Supreme. And we want you there, the suspicious Omega added. Not as a guard. We don't want to be imprisoned. But as, I don't know, someone who understands what it's like to be vulnerable despite having power. The request surprised me. I'm not part of your community. I'm barely tolerated by half the pack as it is. Exactly, the mother said. Which means you don't have competing loyalties, no pack politics to navigate. You're just someone who saved us because you could. That's rare enough to be valuable. I looked at the faces turned toward me. Omegas who'd lost their sanctuary, who'd nearly lost their lives, who were asking me to help rebuild something I'd never expected to be part of. I'll stay, I heard myself say, until you feel safe enough not to need me. The tension in the group eased slightly. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the beginnings of possibility. As I escorted them toward the main compound to discuss housing arrangements with Kieran, the smaller child slipped her hand into mine. Are you going to find the bad person? She asked. The one who helped hurt us? I looked down at her soot-smudged face, at the innocence that had been violated by political violence she couldn't possibly understand. Yes, I promised. I'm going to find them. And when I did, blood oath or not, they were going to regret every choice that had led to this moment. The interrogation room was deliberately sparse. A single table, 2 chairs, and walls inscribed with truth-compelling runes that Mora had activated before we began. The magic wouldn't force confessions, but it would make lies physically uncomfortable for anyone sitting in the suspect's chair. I stood in the corner, observing as Kieran and Marcus questioned the 7th pack member in 3 hours. My role was simple: watch, sense, report what my hybrid instincts detected that normal wolves might miss. So far, we'd cleared 6 pack members. All had been nervous, understandable given the circumstances, but none had shown the specific tells of guilt I was searching for. No spike in heart rate beyond normal anxiety, no defensive body language, no scent markers that indicated deception. The current suspect was a young enforcer named Tobias. He'd had access to the eastern wards and had been on patrol the night before the attack. Walk me through your patrol route again, Marcus instructed, his tone professionally neutral. Tobias repeated the same information he'd given twice already, his story consistent. But something nagged at me. Not deception exactly, but omission. He was telling the truth, just not all of it. I stepped forward, drawing surprised looks from both Kieran and Marcus. We'd agreed I would observe silently unless I detected something significant. May I? I asked Kieran, gesturing to Tobias. The Alpha Supreme nodded, his expression carefully neutral. I approached Tobias slowly, letting him see me coming. I'm going to touch your hand. It won't hurt, but you'll feel pressure, like someone examining your thoughts. Don't resist it. That only makes it worse. Tobias swallowed hard, but extended his hand. I didn't disable the wards. I swear on my pack bonds. I believe you, I interrupted, placing my palm against his. But you saw something that night, something you haven't mentioned. The hybrid sense activated immediately, a flood of images and emotions that weren't quite mind-reading, but close enough. I saw Tobias's patrol route through his memory, felt his boredom at the routine task, and then, there, a flash of recognition as he passed another pack member near the eastern border. Someone who shouldn't have been there at that hour. Someone Tobias knew well enough to greet casually before moving on, dismissing their presence as unremarkable. I released his hand, my heart sinking at what I'd seen. You passed someone near the eastern wards around midnight, I said quietly, Someone you trusted enough not to question why they were there. Who was it? Tobias's face went pale. I didn't think it was important. They said they were checking the perimeter, making sure everything was secure after the Alpha Supreme's announcement about the partnership. Who? Kieran's voice cut through the explanation like a blade. Beta Marcus's son, Tobias whispered. Garrett. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Marcus stood so... Abruptly, his chair crashed backward. That's impossible, he said. But his voice lacked conviction. Garrett would never... Where is he now? I asked, already knowing the answer from the dread pooling in my stomach. He requested permission to visit his mother's grave this morning, Marcus replied, his face ashen. Outside pack grounds. I approved it because... He cut himself off, realization and horror warring in his expression. Because you trusted him, Kieran finished. As any father would. He was already moving toward the door. How long ago did he leave? 2 hours, Marcus said numbly. Then he's gone, I concluded. Probably already rendezvoused with Pure Blood Alliance contacts. The grave visit was cover for his escape. Kieran slammed his fist against the wall, leaving a dent in the stone. Get patrols out now. I want every route from here to the southern border searched. If Garrett is still in our territory, I want him found. Marcus didn't move, frozen in the shock of betrayal. His son, his own blood, had helped murder innocent Omegas, had chosen the Pure Blood Alliance's ideology over pack loyalty, over family. Why? The word came out broken. Why would he do this? I'd seen enough in Tobias's memory to piece together an answer. Because he believed in what they're selling. Traditional hierarchy, alpha supremacy, Omegas as property. Your son didn't betray the pack. In his mind, you betrayed pack values by supporting Kieran's reforms. He's right, Sarah said from the doorway, her expression grim. I've been hearing murmurs for months from younger pack members who think the Alpha Supreme is too soft on Omegas, too willing to compromise pack strength for progressive politics. She focused on Kieran. Garrett isn't the only one who feels that way. He's just the only one who acted on it. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just one traitor. It was a faction within the pack itself. Omegas and progressive policies as weakness. Seeds the Pure Blood Alliance had been planting for months, maybe longer. Lock it down, Kieran ordered, his alpha voice resonating with authority. I want names of everyone Garrett associated with regularly. Devon, interrogate his friends, his training partners, anyone he spent significant time with. We root out this infection now before it spreads further. As pack members scattered to execute his orders, I touched Kieran's arm. There's another option. He turned to me, exhaustion and fury written across his features. What option? Let Garrett go. Let him return to the Pure Blood Alliance and report whatever he thinks he learned. I met his skeptical gaze steadily. But feed him false information first. Make him think we're weaker, more divided than we actually are. Use him as an unwitting weapon against his own allies. That's ruthless, Sarah observed with what sounded like approval. That's strategic, I corrected. The Pure Blood Alliance will strike again, that's certain. But if we control what they know, we can predict where and when. Set a trap instead of waiting to be ambushed. Kieran studied me for a long moment. You think like a tactician. I think like someone who's survived by being smarter than those hunting me, I replied. Your strength is direct confrontation. Mine is misdirection and using enemies' assumptions against them. What kind of false information would we feed him? Marcus asked, having recovered enough to engage with the tactical discussion. I considered the question carefully. The Pure Blood Alliance's goal is to discredit Kieran's reforms, to prove that progressive policies weaken packs. So we give them what they want to believe, that the sanctuary attack succeeded in breaking pack morale, that Omegas are refusing protection, that the pack is fracturing over my presence as a hybrid partner. Some of that is actually true, Sarah pointed out. The Omegas are refusing traditional housing, and the pack is divided about the partnership. Exactly, I agreed. The best deceptions are built on partial truths. We just emphasize certain aspects while downplaying others. Let Garrett report that the partnership is failing, that Kieran's authority is being questioned, that the pack is vulnerable to another strike. And when they strike based on that intelligence? Kieran asked. We'll be ready, I replied. With defenses they don't expect, tactics they haven't prepared for, and a hybrid whose abilities they've forgotten existed for 300 years. Devon appeared in the doorway. We found Garrett's trail. He's heading south as predicted, but he's moving fast. We'd need to shift and pursue immediately to catch him before he crosses into neutral territory. Let him go, Kieran decided, his expression hardening into something predatory. But put a tracker on him. I want to know exactly where he goes, who he meets with, and what he reports back. Marcus. The beta looked up, anguish still evident in his features. This isn't your fault, Kieran said firmly. Parents can't control their adult children's choices, but I need you functional for what's coming. Can you do that? Marcus straightened slightly, alpha discipline overriding personal pain. Yes, Alpha Supreme. What are your orders? Coordinate with Devon on the tracker placement, then gather intelligence on Garrett's known associates within the pack. I want to know who else might be sympathetic to Pure Blood Alliance ideology before they can do more damage. As Marcus left, Kieran turned to me. This plan of yours, it requires the Omegas to play along, to appear vulnerable and divided when they're actually being protected in ways the Alliance won't expect. Can you convince them? I thought about the survivors huddled outside the ruins, about the children who'd asked me to find the bad person, about the mothers who'd requested I stay because I understood vulnerability despite power. I can try, I said, but they're traumatized, Kieran, asking them to participate in a tactical deception while they're still processing almost being burned alive? That's a lot. I know, he replied quietly, which is why I'm not ordering it. I'm asking you to present the option and let them choose. Their consent matters, even in war. The sentiment shouldn't have surprised me. Kieran had proven repeatedly that he valued consent and agency. But it still struck me how different he was from the Alpha Supreme I'd expected when I first entered that great hall. I'll talk to them, I agreed. After I get some rest. My ribs are screaming and I'm pretty sure I'm running on pure stubbornness at this point. Sarah snorted. You charged through a burning building 3 hours ago and then conducted interrogations for another 3. Pretty sure is an understatement. Fine, I'm definitely running on pure stubbornness, I amended. Happy now? Delighted, Sarah replied dryly. Come on, I'll walk you back to your cabin before you collapse and force me to carry you. As we left the interrogation building, I noticed pack members stopping to stare. Word had spread about my role in the rescue, about the interrogations, about my partnership with their Alpha Supreme. Some looks were grateful, others suspicious, many simply curious. They don't know what to make of you, Sarah observed, following my gaze. A hybrid Omega who saves children, conducts interrogations, and advises the Alpha Supreme on military tactics. You don't fit any category they understand. Good, I replied. Categories are how hierarchies maintain power. The moment you can't be categorized, you can't be controlled. Sarah's smile was sharp. I'm starting to understand why Kieran chose you as his partner. We walked in silence for a moment before she continued. For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. When you first arrived, I thought you were either a political pawn or an opportunist using your hybrid abilities to manipulate your way into power. And now? Now I think you're someone who actually believes in what Kieran's trying to build. Someone willing to bleed for ideals rather than status. She paused at my cabin door. That's rare, especially among those with power. Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me alone with that unexpected approval and the bone-deep exhaustion I could no longer ignore. I made it to the bed before my legs gave out, collapsing onto the furs with a groan that was probably undignified but absolutely warranted. My ribs throbbed, my burns ached despite the healing salve, and my hybrid senses were overloaded from hours of reading suspects' emotional states. Sleep claimed me immediately. I woke to darkness and the scent of pine and smoke. Kieran. I didn't mean to wake you, he said from the chair beside my bed. I just wanted to check on your injuries. What time is it? I asked groggily, pushing myself upright, and immediately regretting it as my ribs protested. Just after midnight. You've been asleep for 10 hours. He moved closer, his alpha vision clearly seeing me better in the darkness than I could see him. How do you feel? Like I got crushed by a collapsing building and then spent 3 hours using hybrid senses in ways I'm not accustomed to, I replied honestly. So, pretty terrible. His quiet laugh was unexpected. Mora said you'd likely sleep through the night. She's prepared more healing tea for morning. Can't wait, I muttered sarcastically. The Omegas agreed to your plan, Kieran said, his tone shifting to business. Or more accurately, they agreed after you apparently spent an hour this afternoon convincing them before you collapsed. Elena said you were swaying on your feet by the end but refused to leave until they felt safe enough to consent. I had vague memories of that conversation, of explaining the tactical advantages, of assuring them that choosing to participate didn't make them responsible for the violence that would inevitably follow. The details were fuzzy, lost in exhaustion and pain. They're being moved to a reinforced building on the western edge of Pack Grounds, Kieran continued. It has defensive wards that Mora personally reinforced, panic rooms that conceal from the inside, and enough supplies to survive a siege if necessary. From the outside, it looks like temporary housing, barely more secure than the sanctuary was. But in reality, it's a fortress, I finished. Good. When the Pure Blood Alliance strikes there, expecting easy targets, they'll find prepared defenses instead. Assuming they take the bait, Kieran cautioned. Garrett is smart. He might recognize the deception. He's arrogant, I countered. That conversation I pulled from Tobias's memory. Garrett truly believes Omegas are weak, that protecting them is foolish sentimentality. He'll see what he expects to see because his ideology demands it. Kieran moved to sit on the edge of my bed, close enough that I could feel his warmth. You're remarkably confident in this plan. I'm confident in understanding how prejudice blinds people, I replied. Garrett and the Pure Blood Alliance think Omegas are inherently inferior. That belief will make them underestimate defenses, dismiss warnings, and walk straight into a trap because they can't conceive of Omegas being anything other than victims. And you? Kieran asked softly. What does your hybrid ideology tell you about Omegas? About alphas? I considered the question carefully. My grandmother taught me that the designations, alpha, beta, omega, are just biological categories. They describe certain traits, certain tendencies, but they don't determine worth or capability. An omega can be as strong as an alpha if trained properly. An alpha can be as nurturing as an omega if they choose to be. That's remarkably progressive for someone raised in hiding. That's survival, I corrected. My grandmother knew that buying into the hierarchy, believing omegas were lesser, would destroy us from within. So she taught me to see beyond the categories, to recognize that power comes in many forms. Kieran's hand found mine in the darkness, his fingers tracing the blood, oath scar on my palm. I want you to know something. Regardless of how this conflict with the Pure Blood Alliance ends, regardless of whether the pack accepts you or tears itself apart over your presence, I don't regret choosing you as my partner. My breath caught at the intensity in his voice. Even if it costs you your position as Alpha Supreme? Especially then, he replied, because it would prove that some things matter more than power. That partnership, genuine cooperation between equals, is worth fighting for even when the odds seem impossible. I turned my hand over, lacing my fingers through his. You're an idealist. So are you, he countered. You just hide it better behind tactical thinking and hybrid intimidation. He wasn't wrong. Somewhere between charging into that burning building and convincing traumatized omegas to trust me with their safety, I'd stopped seeing this partnership as merely political convenience. It had become something I believed in, a genuine attempt to build a better system, even if the attempt failed. The Pure Blood Alliance will come soon, I said quietly. Garrett's intelligence will reach them within days. They'll mobilize their forces, plan their attack, and strike when they think we're most vulnerable. I know. People will die. Even with our preparations, even with the tactical advantage of knowing they're coming, violence creates casualties. Some of them will be pack members who trusted you to protect them. I know, Kieran repeated, his voice heavy with the weight of command. And you'll carry that guilt for the rest of your life, I continued. The knowledge that your reforms, your partnership with me made them targets, that their deaths are the price of trying to change the system. His hand tightened on mine. Yes. I studied his face in the darkness, seeing the burden of leadership etched into every line. That's why you'll succeed where others have failed, because you understand the cost. You're not a tyrant who sees pack members as disposable tools, and you're not a coward who avoids conflict to maintain false peace. You're someone willing to fight for change while acknowledging the price that change demands. You have remarkable faith in me, he observed. I have faith in what we're building together, I clarified. Separately, we're just individuals with power. You're an Alpha Supreme trying to reform a broken system from within. I'm a hybrid trying to survive in a world that wants me extinct. But together, we're a demonstration that cooperation works, Kieran finished. That power doesn't have to mean domination. Exactly. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands clasped, both understanding that the coming days would test everything we'd built in these few short weeks. There's something else, Kieran said eventually. Something I need to tell you before the battle comes. I waited, sensing this was important. When I first scented you in that hunting ground, when I singled you out from all the others, it wasn't random. I told you I was searching for someone who could challenge me, someone who made me feel something beyond the political calculations and pack management. That was true, but incomplete. What's the complete truth? He turned to face me fully, his amber eyes intense even in the darkness. My mother was a moon speaker, not hybrid like you, but gifted with sight, with the ability to sense things others couldn't. My father loved her for exactly that quality, the way she saw through his alpha posturing to the man beneath. I absorbed this information, understanding dawning. And when you scented me, you recognized something of her in me. Yes, but more than that, I recognized what my father had described. The sensation of finding someone who sees you completely, who understands both your strength and your vulnerability without needing either explained. This was dangerous territory. We were moving beyond partnership into something more intimate, more binding than any blood oath. Kieran, I'm not asking for anything, he interrupted gently. I'm just telling you the truth. Because when the pure blood alliance attacks, one or both of us might not survive. And I don't want to die without you knowing that this partnership, what we've built, what we're fighting for, it matters to me beyond politics or tactics. I should have pulled away, maintained professional distance, should have reminded him that emotional entanglement complicated strategic decision-making, that caring about partners made you vulnerable. Instead, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was brief, tender, nothing like the passionate claiming kisses described in pack romance stories. Just a moment of connection, of acknowledgement that what existed between us had transcended the boundaries we'd initially set. When I pulled back, Kieran's expression held wonder and something that looked like hope. That was either the best decision you've ever made or the worst, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Probably both, I admitted. But I'm tired of always making the safest choice. Sometimes you have to risk vulnerability to gain something worth having. Is that hybrid wisdom? That's Lyra wisdom, I corrected. Hard-won from 23 years of hiding what I was and wondering if safety was worth the cost of never being truly known. Kieran's smile was brilliant, even in the darkness. Then, I'm honored to be someone you've chosen to be known by. A howl cut through the night, the alarm signal for enemy approach. We both moved instantly, the tender moment shattered by the reality of war. Kieran was on his feet and heading for the door before I could blink. I followed despite my protesting ribs, grabbing weapons from the cabinet I'd noticed earlier. They're here. Sarah's voice came from outside the cabin. Eastern border, approximately 50 fighters. Garrett's leading them. So much for waiting days, I muttered, strapping a knife to my thigh. They must have been mobilizing already, Kieran concluded. Garrett's intelligence just gave them the final details they needed. He turned to me. Can you fight? I tested my ribs carefully. The healing tea had done its work. I was bruised and sore, but functional. I can fight. Then shift to your hybrid form, he ordered, his alpha voice resonating. Show the pure blood alliance what they've forgotten existed. Show them that the old hierarchies are dying and something stronger is rising to replace them. I smiled, feral and fierce. With pleasure. The eastern border was chaos by the time we arrived. Pure Blood Alliance fighters had breached the perimeter, their forces spreading through pack grounds in coordinated attack teams. But they'd made a critical mistake. They'd sent their largest force toward the western edge, toward the building they thought housed vulnerable, undefended Omegas. Instead, they found Mora's wards, Devon's defensive preparations, and pack members who'd been waiting for exactly this attack. I didn't bother with partial shifts or gradual transformation. I let my hybrid form erupt in full glory, scales rippling along my spine, venomous fangs extending, my body expanding to twice its normal size. My eyes blazed molten silver, casting eerie light across the battlefield. The effect on the Pure Blood Alliance fighters was immediate and devastating. Those who'd only heard stories of hybrids, who'd dismissed them as extinct legends, suddenly faced living proof that nightmares could be real. "Hybrid!" someone screamed. "They have a hybrid!" "Impossible!" another shouted. "They're all dead." "Not all," I replied, my layered hybrid voice resonating with frequencies that made wolves whimper and flatten their ears. "Not quite." I waded into the combat with precision and fury. My serpent tail caught fighters who tried to flank me. My venomous fangs delivered paralyzing bites that dropped wolves without killing them. And my hybrid dominance radiated in waves that forced submissions from alphas who'd never bowed to anyone. But I wasn't the only one fighting with devastating effectiveness. Kieran moved through the battlefield like the predator he was, alpha strength combined with tactical brilliance, taking down opponents with efficient brutality. Sarah commanded defensive positions with ruthless competence, and Devon's hunters picked off Alliance fighters who tried to flee. The battle should have been quick. We had superior positioning, better preparation, and a hybrid whose very existence shattered the Pure Blood Alliance's ideological foundation. Then Garrett appeared, and everything changed. He'd shifted to his alpha form, massive and powerful, clearly his father's son in build and ability. But it was what he carried that made my blood run cold. A silver net inscribed with ancient runes designed specifically to contain supernatural beings. Hybrid-specific containment magic, the kind that shouldn't exist anymore because hybrids were supposed to be extinct. "You think you've won?" Garrett shouted across the battlefield, his voice carrying over the sounds of combat. "You think parading a hybrid abomination proves anything except how far you've fallen, Uncle Kieran?" "Uncle." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Garrett wasn't just Marcus's son. He was Kieran's nephew. Family betrayal went deeper than I'd realized. "Stand down, Garrett," Kieran commanded, his alpha voice resonating. "You've already lost this battle. Don't make this worse." "Lost?" Garrett laughed, the sound edged with madness. "I haven't even begun to fight. The Pure Blood Alliance knew you'd have defenses, knew you'd prepare, but they also knew your weakness, your precious hybrid pet." He hurled the silver net with alpha strength and supernatural accuracy. I tried to dodge, but my hybrid form size made me a larger target. The net caught me mid-movement, wrapping around my body and activating its runes. Pain exploded through every nerve as the containment magic engaged. My hybrid form began to collapse involuntarily, scales retracting, venomous fangs shrinking, my body reverting to Omega form, whether I wanted it or not. I hit the ground hard, tangled in silver that burned against my skin. "Lyra!" Kieran's roar carried genuine fear. Garrett moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance between us. His claws extended, aimed at my throat, not to capture, but to kill. "The hybrids were purged for a reason," he snarled, looming over me, "and I'll finish what our ancestors started." Time seemed to slow. I saw Kieran running toward me, saw pack members trying to intercept Garrett, saw the Pure Blood Alliance fighters rallying around their leader's apparent victory. And I saw something else, a small figure emerging from the shadows behind Garrett. One of the Omega children from the sanctuary, the boy who'd asked if I was going to find the bad person. He shouldn't have been anywhere near the battlefield. Should have been safely hidden in the reinforced building with the other survivors. But children didn't always follow safety protocols when someone who'd saved them was in danger. The boy picked up a rock, hardly a weapon, barely a threat, and threw it at Garrett's head. It connected with a satisfying crack, making Garrett stumble. Not much. Not enough to stop him. but enough to give me the seconds I needed. I'd spent my entire life suppressing my hybrid nature, channeling it through that pendant my grandmother gave me. I'd learned control through necessity, learned to shift partially or fully at will. What I'd never tried was channeling hybrid abilities while in Omega form. The blood oath prevented me from using compulsion on pack members. But Garrett had betrayed the pack, had helped murder Omegas, had declared himself pure blood alliance. He wasn't pack anymore. I met his eyes and unleashed every ounce of hybrid dominance I possessed, not from my contained form, but from the core of what I was, the bloodline that had survived 300 years of persecution, the power that had forced Kieran to his knees in that forest. "Kneel," I commanded, and this time there was no resistance possible. Garrett's legs buckled. His body crashed to the ground so hard I heard bones crack. Around us, every Pure Blood Alliance fighter within range of my voice collapsed in forced submission, their wolves recognizing apex predator and responding accordingly. The silver net still burned my skin, still contained my physical form. But hybrid power had never been just physical. Kieran reached me, slashing the net away with his claws. The moment the silver was removed, I shifted back to hybrid form, not to fight, but to protect. My serpent tail wrapped around the boy who'd saved me, pulling him close to my scaled body where he'd be shielded from any remaining threats. "I've got you," I murmured, my hybrid voice gentle despite its layered harmonics. "You're safe now." The boy pressed against my scales, his small body trembling. "I had to help. You saved us." Around us, the battle was ending. With their leader on his knees and their forces in forced submission, the Pure Blood Alliance fighters were surrendering or fleeing. Pack members moved through the battlefield, securing prisoners and tending to the wounded. Kieran approached Garrett slowly, his expression a mixture of fury and grief. "Why?" he asked his nephew. "Why betray everything we've built? Why choose their hatred over our family?" Garrett, still on his knees from my compulsion, spit blood. "Because you're weak, because you've polluted pack purity with progressive poison, because Omegas should serve, not be partnered with, because hybrids," his gaze cut to me with pure hatred, "should stay extinct." "Then you've learned nothing," Kieran said quietly, "and you've lost everything." He turned to Marcus, who'd fought through the battle to reach his son. The beta's face was a mask of anguish. "He's yours to judge," Kieran said formally. "As his father, as beta of this pack, the choice of his punishment is yours to make." It was an enormous gesture, giving Marcus authority over his own son's fate when pack law would have given Kieran that right as Alpha Supreme. Marcus looked at Garrett for a long moment, seeing not the traitor who'd helped murder innocents, but the child he'd raised, the son he'd loved. "Exile," he said finally, his voice breaking, "stripped of pack bonds, denied territory and protection. He leaves at dawn and never returns. If he sets foot in our lands again, he will be executed on sight." Garrett's expression twisted with rage and pain. "You're choosing them over me? Choosing a hybrid abomination? And weak Omegas over your own blood?" "I'm choosing what's right over what's easy," Marcus replied, "something you never learned to do." As pack members dragged Garrett away to be held until Dawn's exile, I slowly released my hybrid form, shifting back to Omega. The boy in my arms, still protected, still safe, looked up at me with something like worship. "You really are dangerous," he said, "but good dangerous, the kind that protects." "That's the goal," I agreed, setting him gently on his feet. "Now go back to your mother before she has a heart attack from worrying about you." He nodded and scampered off toward where the sanctuary survivors were emerging from their reinforced building, having successfully defended themselves against the Alliance fighters who'd tried to attack them. Kieran approached, his own injuries evident but not severe. "You broke the blood oath." "I used compulsion on Pure Blood Alliance fighters," I corrected. "Not on pack members. Garrett abandoned his pack bonds the moment he helped them attack us. Technically, I fulfilled the oath's requirements." "Technically," Kieran repeated, his lips twitching into an almost smile. "That's impressively lawyerly for someone who usually favors direct action. I have my moments." I swayed slightly, exhaustion and silver burn catching up with me. Kieran caught me before I could fall, his arms steady and warm. "You're becoming a habit. What, saving your pack members or collapsing after battles?" "Both," he replied, "but I'm not complaining." Around us, pack members were dealing with the aftermath, treating wounded, securing prisoners, assessing damage. But through the chaos, I noticed something significant. Omegas worked alongside Alphas in the defensive cleanup. Warriors acknowledged sanctuary survivors who'd helped fight from their reinforced position. Even Sarah was coordinating with Elena on medical triage, power dynamics temporarily set aside in favor of practical cooperation. "It's working," I murmured, watching the interactions. "Your reforms, our partnership, people are seeing that cooperation works better than hierarchy." "One battle doesn't change centuries of tradition," Kieran cautioned. "The Pure Blood Alliance will regroup. There will be other attacks, other challenges to what we're building." "I know," I agreed. "But for tonight, for this moment, we proved it's possible. That's more than most reformers ever accomplish." He held me closer, his chin resting on top of my head. "Thank you for fighting, for staying, for believing this was worth the risk." "Thank you for being worth the risk," I countered. We stood like that for a long moment, two beings who should have been enemies, Alpha Supreme and Hybrid Omega, finding partnership in the ruins of a system that had tried to keep us apart. Finally, Sarah approached, her expression carefully neutral. "Alpha Supreme, the prisoners are secured and the wounded are being treated. Casualties are remarkably light. 3 pack members with serious injuries, none fatal. The sanctuary building held perfectly. No Omega casualties from the secondary attack." "And our own casualties?" Kieran asked. "None dead, several wounded. The hybrid—" Sarah paused, glancing at me. Lyra's intervention prevented significant losses. Her compulsion stopped the Alliance forces before they could do serious damage. It was the first time Sarah had used my name instead of referring to me as the hybrid, or the Omega. A small thing, but significant. "Coordinate with Mora on healing priorities," Kieran instructed. "And Sarah, thank you for everything tonight." The enforcer nodded and departed, leaving us alone again in the chaos of aftermath. "What happens now?" I asked. "With Garrett? With the Pure Blood Alliance? With your pack's future?" Kieran considered the question carefully. "Now we rebuild. We prepare for the next attack because there will be one. We continue reforming pack hierarchy despite the resistance. And we prove, battle by battle, decision by decision, that partnership works better than domination. That's a long-term strategy." "I'm a patient man," he replied, "and I have an excellent partner to help me see it through." I looked up at him, at this alpha who'd gone from hunting me to partnering with me, who'd risked his position and his pack to prove that change was possible. "You know what the most dangerous thing about you is?" I asked. "My tactical brilliance? My alpha strength? My devastatingly handsome features? I laughed despite my exhaustion. Your optimism. Your genuine belief that people can be better, that systems can change, that cooperation can replace competition. It's dangerous because it's contagious. Is that a complaint? It's an observation, I clarified. A few weeks ago, I was focused on survival, keeping my hybrid nature hidden, protecting my settlement, avoiding attention. Now I'm fighting battles to reform pack hierarchy, saving Omega children, and apparently kissing Alpha Supremes in the dark. Apparently, he agreed, his smile warm and genuine. How do you feel about that trajectory? I thought about the question honestly, about everything I'd risked, everything I'd gained, everything I was choosing to build instead of just survive. Terrified, I admitted, exhausted, uncertain about the future, but also, I met his eyes, also hopeful. For the first time in my life, I'm not just hiding what I am. I'm using it for something that matters. That's worth the fear. Then we're in agreement, Kieran replied. Because I'm terrified too. Every decision I make could get pack members killed. Every reform attempt could trigger more resistance. Every day with you as my partner brings me closer to losing either my position or my life. And yet, I've never been more certain I'm on the right path, he finished. Because some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible. Dawn was breaking over the pack grounds, painting the sky in violent strokes of crimson and gold. The Pure Blood Alliance fighters were being transported to holding cells. Garrett was awaiting his exile, and pack members were beginning the long process of repair and recovery. And in the middle of it all stood an Alpha Supreme and a hybrid Omega, partners in reformation, bound by blood oath and something deeper that neither of them had quite named yet. So, what's our next move? I asked, ready, despite my exhaustion, to keep fighting. Kieran's smile was fierce and full of promise. We show the supernatural world what's possible when power serves purpose instead of ego. We build a pack where all beings, Alpha, Beta, Omega, Hybrid, are valued for their contributions rather than their designations. And we prove that the Pure Blood Alliance's vision of the past is nothing compared to what we can build for the future. That's an ambitious goal. Good thing I have an ambitious partner, he countered. I laughed, the sound carrying across the battlefield, where pack members were working together to rebuild what had been damaged. Omegas and Alphas, survivors and warriors, all cooperating because they'd seen firsthand that cooperation worked. All right, Alpha Supreme, I said, straightening despite my injuries. Let's reform the world. Together, he confirmed, taking my hand. Together, I agreed. And as the sun rose over pack grounds, illuminating the damage and the hope in equal measure, I realized something profound. I had come to this pack expecting to survive one night. Instead, I'd found a purpose worth living for, and a partner worth fighting beside. The Pure Blood Alliance would return. There would be more battles, more challenges, more moments where everything we'd built seemed ready to collapse. But we'd face them together, Alpha and Hybrid, partner and partner, building something new from the ashes of something broken. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to change the world. If you made it this far, you absolute legend. This story of Lyra and Kieran proving that power without compassion is tyranny, and that true strength comes from partnership, not domination, is complete. If you loved this journey from enemies to partners to something more, smash that like button, drop a comment telling me your favorite moment from the story, and subscribe so you never miss another epic tale. Want to see more hybrid romance? More pack politics? More stories where the weak Omega turns out to be the most dangerous being in the room? Let me know in the comments what you want to see next. Your support makes these stories possible. Until next time, stay wild, stay fierce, and remember, sometimes the greatest power is choosing partnership over domination. Peace.